Great. I did not know that you did not have handouts, so they are on their way. So probably they'll be in here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So sorry about that. One other thing, just a note, we've been talking about identity development and the delayed adolescence, the issue of delayed adolescence. You might be familiar with recent research. There's actually has been proposed, I think it's very accepted now, is a new stage in development, and that would be called emerging adulthood. Honestly, I started reading about it about 5-6 years ago, but now it is included in the adolescent textbooks. So we have this new stage, which basically adolescence is seen as, or viewed as beginning with puberty, so around 11 or 12, ending about 18, and now emerging adulthood is the 18 through about 25. So it's a very interesting, and you know, I mean, one way of thinking about that to make us all feel better about it is that it's basically, you know, adolescence even as itself is a social construct. You know, there's nothing firm developmentally or physically that happens, although it does begin with puberty. So, but anyway, J.J. Arnett is probably the predominant writer in emerging adulthood. So if you're interested in looking at these years, the 18 to 25, J.J. Arnett would probably be the best source. He's the one who really started the whole thing. So, okay, so that's just a little side note there. Let's see. Okay, faith and the doubts that students had in faith really generated from 3 different sources. One of them, obviously, loneliness. And you heard that quote from the girl who talked about how, gosh, I feel so lonely. Does that mean God isn't present? Or where is God? If God is real, why don't I feel him? One of the things that was very interesting, and I think it might be a generational deal, but certainly students are very aware of how they feel. In other words, their experience with God is so related to their feelings and not necessarily their thoughts. And that I heard over and over again was about not feeling God, or I remember feeling God in worship. So there's definitely this experiential thing, which means that if they don't feel God, they doubt his presence. And that's something I think we've got to somehow balance out, because I think, I think my generation swung to the head, end of the spectrum, and now I see this generation's kind of swung the other way. Somehow we need that pendulum to come about midway, and just kind of between the two would be a good balance. Classes, the classes they take, particularly comparative religion classes, are very difficult for students. They are not exposed to other religions until, and oftentimes, until they get to college. And then suddenly they're hit with these classes and they're thinking, wow, this is a viable option. They had never thought, because they've just been raised in the Christian bubble, if you will, and so they don't know what else is out there, and then suddenly they see those options as viable. So I think that's a big issue. I think we need to do a better job prepping, but we'll get to that later. The other portion of that I want to talk about is this neo-atheism. You've heard about on campuses. It's kind of like the new atheism, if you will. These folks are extremely well-versed in the Bible, and typically can defend their atheism better than our students can defend their faith. So I think, again, because of the threat of that, and that's a growing movement, I think that's something we've really got to keep on our radar. But this is happening. In other words, they're getting it not only from classes, they're also getting it from friends. They're getting a lot of input. I had one student, interestingly, this is my hockey rink guy, who said to me, "Why didn't you ever tell me about the Gospel of Thomas?" I'm like, excuse me? It's like, you never told us. Never told you what? Well, why wasn't it included? Obviously, it was a political thing, blah, blah, blah. He basically read the Da Vinci Code, and he had a class where the professor reinforced his thinking that it was a total political thing of what reason why the Gospel of Thomas is not one of our Gospels. And so he was just, it was like totally accusatory. Why didn't you tell us about the Gospel of Thomas? It's like, wow, that was a faith, That was a faith crisis right there. But they're getting this information in all these different classes, which tells me that we need to do a better job of really preparing our students for what they're going to hit. The last thing is a lot of students raised issues about suffering and injustice. In other words, this is really difficult for them. When I first interviewed students during the spring of their freshman year, I was only 1 week away from Virginia Tech. And as I told you, many of these schools, 3 of the schools that I interviewed at were in Virginia. Many of them knew people at Virginia Tech. And so I ran into that, as well as Haiti, Katrina, and just being more aware of suffering in the world as a result of their college experience. And so not really being able to deal with that and understand who is God if he allows this suffering to happen to the innocent. And so that was a huge question that many of them are entertaining. And honestly, I was happy that at least they're thinking it through, but certainly they didn't have the resource to respond to that. And so it sent them into a bit of a crisis. So anyway, these are the 3 sources that I found as far as faith doubts. Now, I know this isn't shocking. Role of parents is extremely important in faith development. Extremely important. And this is, honestly, this is what gives me the most hope for those students who have fallen away, is that many of their parents are faithful. Many of their parents did do a great job. I mean, just the practices that I heard within their homes, just amazing things. And so I'm hoping that those will kick in, that something's going to, bring those back to remembrance. Integrity and credibility. Integrity, meaning, do what you say what you do. And tonight I'll be meeting with parents and talking about this. The students are, they've just got radar for inconsistency. They really, and your kids are probably your biggest critics. They just spot stuff and it just sends them off on a tear. And it's so that consistency in lifestyle. Again, I had someone whose father was actually a couple whose parents were on elder boards, and yet they did not see faith at home. Just crazy. I actually had one whose mother was going through the ordination process with the denomination, and that student told me she had never had a faith conversation with her mother. And her mother had actually served in the church, was now going through ordination, and never a faith conversation. So how do you connect those dots? Here's someone who's giving up their life for God, dedicating their life to God, and yet doesn't have one conversation with their daughter. Interestingly, the father, and this couple was divorced, the father went on missions trips with this girl. The father was much more engaged, and yet that inconsistency just really stood out to this girl. I mean, she just couldn't see how this matches up. The credibility. This was interesting to me. One of my students had just told me straight out, he's closest to his mother, loved his mother, adored his mother. Mother walked on water. Mother, mom cooked stuff for youth groups, supported the youth group in every way possible, just a wonderful person. But at the end of the day, when this student decided he was agnostic by the time he was a senior, at the end of the day, he says, yeah, mom's great, but she's just not that bright. Now, this is an engineering student whose father is an engineer, and so he connected at, obviously an intellectual level or something with his dad, and yet, I mean, seriously, freshman year, all he could do was talk about his mom. And yet, by the time he got to senior year and was actually making choices, he decided his mom was really sweet, but just not well informed, and so he discounted her faith, which was really sad to me, because I think his mom was just doing leaps, just everything possible to help him in his faith growth. And so he decided to go the way of his dad, who basically couldn't get out of bed in the morning to go to church. But it's because he thought his dad was a more credible source. So, I put that up there with a little hesitation, because it's like, again, a student's perception, and just to say that's his. Consistency, and this was fascinating between the two. probably the biggest issues I saw with students, or the students who had the biggest issues in their faith walks, were the students where the mom and dad were doing different things. They're totally on different levels. One set of parents that I met with, the dad is talking about how he's praying with his sons every night, and actually walking through life's changes with his sons so that they can understand how God impacts all of life. And the mom comes up in the middle of this interview and says, yeah, but I tell him, you got to lighten up. What are you doing? You're just... And I'm like, oh my gosh, the inconsistency in those two parents was just really noteworthy. And I think made a significant difference. The kid was hearing two different things, and he definitely chose the way that the mom was talking rather than the way the dad was living. Intentionality, making time with each child. This is something that I learned another parent interview where the dad in the family, and I'm going to get to the role of dad here in a minute, but the dad actually took out each daughter, he's got 4 daughters, every morning of every week, he took a different daughter out for breakfast. Sat with her, talked about her life with her, prayed with her. I mean, it was just like over the top. I mean, just, and I ran into them once where I walked out of a restaurant and I walk up, I see him in the car, so I'm knocking on the window. Well, don't you know they're praying? That was great. But it was just like I saw it, and I saw them in at breakfast earlier and, just chatting, and he's totally involved, but asking very specific questions about life and faith, and then praying with each individual daughter. All 4 of those girls are just fabulous. And actually, that was Katie at the beginning. That's her dad. The role of dad here, but all that is to say, excuse me, let me go back. All that is to say is those intentional conversations, those planned times, really being much more focused and not just, I don't know about you, but when I drive around kids, sometimes it's just like, just casual stuff and junk stuff, chatty stuff, not real relevant. And what I've learned from these parents is the importance of really taking advantage of those times and asking critical questions, deep questions, faith questions. Because again, I keep going back to the default. They want to be known. They want to be known. And so the best way for us is to really ask those deeper questions. That's the best, in other words, open the door so that they can walk through it. The role of dad. Not exactly politically correct, and honestly, I'm not happy about this one, but it's reality. The role of dad through adolescence is critical. Dad's involvement, dad's engagement, and I think even more so than mom's during adolescence. And that's why I say it's not politically correct, and I love to think everybody's doing their part and all that, but it's the dad that has such huge emphasis and influence during adolescence. If the dad checks out, and I had multiple dads who were sleeping in on Sunday mornings and moms who were going to church and, just totally engaged, then the kids tended to fall off. They just didn't see it. But if it's important to dad, then somehow it seems more important to the students. And I don't understand that. I don't even like it, but it's the reality. So, it's just, again, I'm talking about findings, not my personal opinion. So, there was one other thing. I wanted to hit here. The intentional conversation, one of the things that I realized as I went through summarizing each of these students, and we're talking hours of interviews. These, 15 times 3, and some of them are really chatty. Some of them, the transcripts are 45 pages long for one of these things. But anyway, as I went through, I've been reading through all of them over the past month again, just to make sure that, I've captured them and I haven't missed anything. I didn't realize how many of them had gone through life crises. One of them, divorces, 2 divorces. We had one where it was the dad was in depression, the mom was in alcohol. One of them, sister, alcohol poisoning. Another one, her sister, and she was in the car when her sister drove and hit another car and killed the person in the other car and actually got sent to jail for that. All sorts of different things that these kids had been through. And those who seemed to do the best as they went through so many different tragedies in their lives, where those were the family hit them together. In other words, they approached, whether it was the sister in the car accident, the fatal car accident, they went at that as a family together, praying together, just living it together. Basically, she had to serve some time in jail in the summer, but got her job back as a teacher at the end of that. But the family, and she said, the town just talks about still to this day about how we did this together as a family, and was just so supportive. The family with the depression and alcoholism, they totally involved their daughter in that process as they kind of came clean to her. And she said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, we want to do this together. We need your help as part of this family, and we need to engage the church. And so together they went to the church, asked for help for both the parents. I mean, it's an amazing story. And this girl says, she says, we just prayed every night together. I mean, my parents realized how deep in the hole they were, and thankfully they came clean, and together we worked through this all. And it didn't seem like a burden to her, because I worry about that. That seems like a lot. But as you know, most kids would have known anyway. So is it you leave them out of the picture or you bring them in? And quite honestly, her faith, she's the one who was the 45-page, boy, she could talk a midnight streak, I got to tell you. But that girl, but her faith was solid from day one and through college, involved in ministries there, leading now is a youth worker now in the Virginia area. But just a great story, but just how people work through. So the intentionality is really critical, I think. Okay, consistent and significant. Here you go. This is you. Here you go. I know you waited this long, finally. Consistent and significant relationship with a youth worker was strongly related to faithful transitions to and through college. So I want to read you Julia here. What helped you grow before college? Now, I've actually left the name of her youth worker in here because, quite honestly, I want to honor her. This girl is amazing. Hands down, my small group and Kristen. I can also say my experience with my small group is an extraordinary one. Very rarely do you hear about a small group leader who stays from 6th to 12th grade. I went on one missions trip with the group, which was a fabulous experience. We ran a VBS and service cleanup project. It was awesome. Really strong and tight-knit Christian community, which you spend every waking minute with. The community and the closeness of the group made all the difference. Kristen's been a huge part of my life. She was a spiritual role model and authority figure during 6th grade. She'd be the one to restore order in the midst of chaos. Invested lots of time, sent lots of postcards, invitations to come over for cookie making, invested a lot of herself in me, a real role model. During high school, she continued to pour her time and energy into us girls. She continued to pursue spending time with us. As I grew older, I realized how amazing it was that she put so much into us. So selfless, willing to serve, so matter-of-factly. Close to senior year, we became more friends. I finally started to ask her more about her life. During middle school, our relationship was more me-focused. Now we're just really, really close friends. She's in her early 30s now, willing to pray for me, pray with me. We're still in touch. An amazing testimony of a youth worker who consistently was there from 6th grade, is still there today, as this student is now working as a nurse. And amazing testimony. And one of the things when we get to the implications, we're going to talk about that longevity piece and the level of engagement. But this girl, this woman, walked on water. I mean, it's like she gave up so much to just be with these girls, the same small group that went all the way from 6th grade through 12th grade. Amazing. With that consistency, one of the things I want to point out is that because of the way that students live such fragmented lives, you think about today's world. Excuse me. You've got their high school environment. You might be at a regional church. different group. Maybe a sports team, maybe a music thing that you got going, music lessons, music group, music something. You might have a travel team. I mean, all of these different venues that students find themselves in. Maybe even Young Life on top of church. And so you've got all these different places where students are known. What we're finding is that because their identity is not well established, they live these fluctuating selves. They live out different people in different places. And so I think about Patricia Hirsch in A Tribe Apart. We certainly found it there, where a student would show up at Young Life and be all, into God and all that stuff, and then in the middle of the night wake up and, drink some beer and go paint the tunnels down in Virginia, the train tunnels in Virginia, tag them, graffiti. And it's like, oh, just this different lives kind of thing, living different lives. Well, one of the things that I discovered was that if individuals have consistent people in these multiple contexts, it really helps their identity develop because there's accountability there. But if they are just moving from one group to the next and there's no sameness there, then it's difficult. They are literally trying on different selves to see which one they like or which one is more appreciated in the context they're in. And so that's been a very interesting. Those who have done best in their transition were those who had other students in their same context, multiple contexts. So, for instance, I've got this one who wrote this, had a friend in that group who was also in band, in her AP classes at school, in church, went to the same camp, and sports, played sports together, both on track teams. But they were in, 5 different settings where they could find each other. Oh, in their small group, 6, same setting. But it's, I think that's something for us to pay attention to because our students are definitely living very fragmented lives. And as a result, again, that identity is just extremely fragmented. So something for us to consider. Okay, ongoing relationships with other adults in the church community was significant in supporting growing faith through college. One of the things we know is that you can only stretch so far as a youth worker. There are only so many lives you personally can impact. I mean, that's just reality at a deep, significant level. And so there have got to be other adults involved. And I'm not just talking about the volunteers that lead the small groups. I'm not talking about that. That's absolutely necessary as well. But I'm talking about other adults. Providing church family that is extended beyond just the youth ministry. And for multiple reasons. I think the primary reason is that we want these students connected to the larger church, not just to the youth group. And so other adults in the congregation, their involvement will help that. They'll help make that bridge. Parents, yes. I mean, you've often heard kids say, I don't know, I hear them say this all the time. Oh, yeah, I'm going into the mothership today. They're going to the big service, the adult service. And so that's just, but it's more of just where they're going to sit as opposed to where they're involved. So having other adults involved with these students really helps bridge them into the whole church community. Ways I've seen this happen, one of my favorite examples out of this was one of the students, the 80-year-old mayor from his town, just loved him, adored him, was in his church, and I mean, she just made a beeline for him every time he walked in the door, and he liked it. And so he would meet with her, talk with her. As soon as he went to college, she starts sending him stuff, packages, postcards, letters, all this kind of stuff, which, as you know, college students do not get mail. I mean, they get emails. They don't get real mail, so packages and that kind of stuff, whew, it's a holiday. But the other thing that she did was as soon as he would come home for a break, whether it was Columbus Day or Thanksgiving or Christmas, she's on the phone. She's calling him, saying, hey, you're home. Let's get together. And he talks about her as a mentor, an 80-year-old woman. And so it is so powerful to me. When I asked him, and I asked each of these students, who would you call? If you're in trouble, you got an issue, who are you going to call? And his response was her. You know, absolutely, hands down, be the first person. She has made such a significant connection with him, and he loved it. It's really helped. Well, she also got him to start teaching Sunday school at the church. So again, when I asked him, what is helping you grow in your faith? The fact that I teach Sunday school. You know, because that's a regular thing. I got to be at church. I can't skip. You know, I've got a commitment there. And I'm with these kids. I got to be right with them. I got to be straight with them. So that really helps me in my faith. Again, it's this woman who did that. The other way I've seen this work very effectively is especially with music. You know, adults in the congregation who have got musical gifts, strengths, they might even be part of the worship team, but tutoring and helping students to develop their musical abilities, and then inviting them, particularly if they're on the worship team, to actually share in leading worship. That is a powerful, powerful testimony and impact on those students. That's had a big, I've seen that multiple times. So that's pretty much, that's it. That's the 8th. Okay, any questions about those? It's a lot of info. It's a lot of, sorry, has everybody got that handout now? Okay. One of the things that you might, you'll see that there's those 4 lines that one leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. The 4th is the college lifestyle. And that's the sad thing. It's like the loneliness leads to the party, which leads to a lot of sexual activity, which really kind of sets the whole program for the college lifestyle. The 4 years, sadly.